Hey,
Hi,
come on. How you doing?
I'm great. How you doing?
Pretty good. Let me swap this around. Hold on a sec.
As great as it is to look at your desk. Oh, there's your face. Hello.
There I am.
I haven't seen you in months and years, probably. Actually, I saw you in recent.
I think it's been years at this point.
Great. Good
So,
years. I love it.
and,
Yeah.
how's it going in Maine?
Good. It's like really hot all of a sudden. Like it gets hot now in the summer. It's summertime, so it gets like hot. And
Yeah.
which is kind of I guess on theme, but yeah.
Well,
So
it's good to see you. I think we can start now. A minute short. So let me see. Maybe I'll wait another minute in case people
yeah,
are
give it a minute.
joining.
Give it a minute.
I like your background with the books here.
Yeah, like that's actually my
Is
book.
that your actual background?
No.
Um,
My desk is like over here, and like so like when I'm on work calls, like it's like you can get this way, and like of course there's like a picture of like a sailboat and stuff because of course like New England, right? But yeah, so like that goes that way. But I was like I figure I need like an academic looking background behind me, and
no. I feel like I need to do this. I need to get on the like my background is, as you saw before I actually have to swap it right. It's literally just a mess. It's an absolute mess of just wires and components. There are some books. It's just a mess.
I love it.
All right. Okay, here we are. It's 12 o'clock. Let's start this.
12 I'm ready.
12 to no longer than 1, but I think it'll probably be about 45 minutes for everybody watching. I'm David Legier of Woodhall Press, and I'm joined today by Nick Mancuso, author of Fever. Now, Nick, tell us a little bit about who you are and what Fever's about.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, it's so great to be here. It's so funny doing all these things like this. It's like so odd, but anyway, so I'm a writer and essayist. I live in Maine. I went to school with Dave, and a long time ago, and so Fever, which I have a copy I can hold up as I talk. Isn't that nice? I can actually like hold it. Fever is a novel, obviously, about suburban Connecticut and a perfect suburban Connecticut suburb where everything is absolutely perfect on the surface. And as we all know, when places are perfect like that, very often they are not. And so Fever is actually the story about a summer where there is, it's over the course of 1 month, really, when it's so hot. And over the course of this one summer, these four people's lives intersect and collide and smash into each other and with devastating consequences. So tragedy abound. Yeah, that's kind of it's not really a good way to describe it, but it is what it is.
It's a good way. So what I'm always curious about, right, whenever I read a proposal, when I came across Fever, it's the inspiration behind the main characters, right? What drives us? What inspired these, four main characters of yours?
Yeah. So first of all, this whole place is, you say, everybody always says like, write what you know, right? And so I'm from, a very perfect Connecticut suburban town. Dorset, Connecticut in my book is not Madison. It could be, but it also could be New Canaan and Glastonbury and everything. So the four main characters, we follow two men and two women. It's, I think all of them are pieces of myself. So we'll just, I guess, go in order. Neil is a early 30-something who's lost in his sense of direction. His father passes away early on in the novel. He wasn't particularly close to him, but he sort of is experiencing loss and feeling what that feels like and trying to deal with sort of a breakup that happened a couple years before. Amanda is a white woman, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, who is trapped in a really, really difficult marriage, which on the surface, she works so hard to make everything seem like it's good and everything is like positive. But the reality is it's actually really dysfunctional and frankly, deeply abusive. And then there's Carla, who is a woman of color who has moved to this neighborhood with her husband. She's got an exciting job teaching at Yale, so it does place it in Connecticut, and moves to this perfect suburban neighborhood. Writing her, so I wrote this book 5-6 years ago, and the world 5-6 years ago was different from the world today, and even different from the world of a month ago. And so I wanted to make sure that if I was going to tell a story that had at least a quarter of it follow a woman of color, then I did my research. So I spent 2 years reading fiction exclusively by women of color. And then I took a crack at it and hired a sensitivity reader as well, and that sort of pieces for this piece. And, you know, there's like a rolling conversation about this right now. And, you know, I don't know that I would do it again. And I definitely am trying to make sure that I'm not taking up space that somebody else needs and doesn't have access to. But her character was definitely the hardest to write. But, you know, the reality is that even as white conforming as she and her husband were, I mean, in fact, they had more prestigious jobs and more prestigious education than the rest of the white people in the neighborhood. And they still are not accepted. And there's still microaggressions, and there's still discomfort, and there's still, frankly, racism. And so writing Carlo was actually something that, you know, was really hard. And you know, I don't know if I got it right. I certainly, you know, I certainly tried my best to do justice for it. But yeah. And then the last character is perhaps, and this is perhaps a little too revealing, sort of a thumbnail sketch of myself at 17. Although, you know, the situations are very different. He doesn't have a dad in the picture. I very much have a dad and a mom and, you know, and a bunch of siblings. And he's trying to sort of find himself as sort of he enters his last year of high school, and sort of as his friends are starting to get ready to do the college thing, you know, what does his future hold? And so over the course of these 4 weeks, these people all intersect and collide with each other. And yeah, so it's kind of a really long-winded, but it's 4 characters, so you kind of have to like go all the way around.
And I like how you embrace the fact that one character, right, is modeled off you, because everybody writes, and I see this across the board. Everybody always says, "Oh, a character's just nothing like me," and then you read it, and you're like, "Pretty sure this is a little similar."
Oh yeah.
And I like that because we write from what we know a lot of times, right? You write what you know, and I think that's good. So now that we know what Fever's about, you know, why was it this story that you had to tell? You know, like, it's a major undertaking to take on a book. You know, a lot of times people start it, they stop, they come back to it. But you did it, you published it. It's a wonderful book. Check it out if you haven't read it already. But why did you write it?
That's a good question. So I grew up in this place, very much like this. And the reality is that, you know, I think a lot of these perfect suburban places have this this fallacy that this is an amazing place. And so I originally wanted to write sort of a noir novel, right? A traditional noir, Chinatown, you know, detective smoking in the rain type deal. But I sort of realized how that phrase, the term noir, can apply to a bunch of different pieces of fiction. And I can actually use a prop. Roxane Gay's novel right here, An Untamed State, is like a perfect noir novel, and it's not about detectives and crime fighting and you know, smoking trench coats in the rain. You know, that's not. And so it's noir is sort of something that you take something that should be very beautiful and render it very darkly. And so you know, these suburban neighborhoods are supposed to be these perfect places, but there's a lot of loss, and there's a lot of tragedy, and there's a lot of lies and hidden deceit and that sort of thing in these places. And so I wanted to sort of try and tell that story and sort of, because so growing up, I always noticed there was this big effort to always make sure that everything looked wonderful. And it's even part of my cohesiveness. I mean, and I'll be transparent with you, this is not my usual backdrop, but I want to make sure that it looks good for what I'm doing. So I put it in front of my bookshelf. It's like, this is on a stool with like 5 books on it. I can show you guys later, but you know, and because you want to make sure that, because perception is a lot of things. And so that is a huge philosophy of these spaces. And so I wanted to make sure that I captured that, because I think, you know, so it's funny because I was talking to someone, and it just, you know, I was in a work context, and I said, yeah, so I'm from Madison, Connecticut. She's like, I love Madison, Connecticut. And I said, you do? She's like, oh, what a perfect little seaside town. It's so beautiful and serene and bucolic, and it's just so like mellow and nice. And I was like, uh-huh. And then she's like, so what are you doing? I was like, oh, I wrote a novel. And she said, what's it about? And I was like, it's not like Madison, Connecticut, and maybe it's not as bucolic and perfect as everybody thinks. So yeah, so that was kind of the inspiration for why I wrote this. And I just started you know, these characters go through different things and experience different things, and over the course of like these weeks, I there's so many little tiny things in here that like I've borne witness to that are just like somebody, you know, somebody talking shit about somebody who serves wine in the wrong shaped glass. Like that is a thing. Like people get upset about that. Like what? Like, well, this is obviously a white wine. Why would you put that in a red wine glass? What? In what universe? So that's definitely something that is like a big piece of it.
So I love that you talked about that, and you're a first-time author, and you've succeeded, right? It's so hard to break through, right? That's the entry point. I think even a lot of the people that are joining and watching are aspiring writers. So what was your tip? You know, like what advice do you have to get published, and what worked for you on your journey? Now, full disclosure, Nick was first published by Magnolia Press, which went on slightly a little harder times, and I said, Nick, we need your book, and I pulled it in. But you were originally published with Magnolia Press. So what was your how did you do it? Like what can you say to other authors out there?
Yeah. So I'm going to recommend something absolutely terrible, which is get on Twitter. Twitter is a cesspool of awful and just the worst place full of terrible people. But I originally got my first offer because of Twitter. So on Twitter, there's these pitch contests. And so I wrote a pitch about Fever. And this is actually kind of a terrible thing that I shouldn't be telling you, Dave, but I'm going to. Is that a couple of years ago, I was pitching the novel that was my thesis from Fairfield. And, you know, wasn't getting a ton of success, was getting some hits, and it was one of those pitch contest days. And so I was pitching that book and seeing what you do. And basically you write a tweet that sums up the entire plot of the book. You throw certain hashtags on it. And on certain days and times, people go through and they go through, agents and editors like it. And if they like the pitch, that means they want to see it. And so I was pitching this other book and I was having medium success. I was like having like, okay, like, yeah, a little bit of success here, you know, 3 or 4 hits. I was like, this is fine. And it was like getting to the end of the day, it was like 4 o'clock and I was in process of writing Fever. I'd had like 3 chapters written. And I said, just as market research, let me just like write a tweet, which is what you're not supposed to do. You're only supposed to pitch books that are done and ready to go. And so I was like, and I wrote one and I got like 64 hits in like 20 minutes. People wanted to read it. I was like, oh, wow, a lot going on. And then out of that, several people wanted to request the whole thing, which is hard to do when you haven't written it. So I like called out of work for a week and just like finished getting it out. And none of those people, obviously that didn't work out because it was not done and it was a first draft. And but then, you know, a few months later, another pitch contest came up and the editor from Magnolia hit like on it. And we started corresponding and she liked it and said she wanted to make sure that she could get it. And I said, all right, then there you go. And then Magnolia, I think they were closing, they're running a business. There was a bunch of, there was a bunch of pieces to it. And I was so grateful to get your call because, you know, they weren't doing the kind of marketing I was hoping for. And there were a bunch of pieces. And so I was really, really excited to join the Woodhull family. And it's been awesome ever since. We joined up in December and I think it's been fun. I think it's, you know, hopefully we've sold some books. I'm waiting for my first report. I won't get it for another couple of weeks, but I think we're doing okay.
It's going well. You know, and I love that you bring up the fact that you did slightly unconventional marketing of yourself, right? You used Twitter and you created a product that didn't exist. And you actually read that more and more. If you know, a lot of these self-help books, right? And these business books always talk about selling your product first to first determine whether or not there's a product. Now, a good example of this is people will sometimes create a website, right, for a book that doesn't even exist. Beautiful cover copy. I mean, it's perfect. And then what they do is gauge whether or not people even are interested. And then they actually create the product. I'm not advocating that, but I do see that there is a method behind gauging whether or not, with a little bit of market research, you want to just invest this time into it. So that was good. I like that.
And honestly, I've been doing that sort of in a subtle way with some people, you know, because I sort of have 3 projects right now that I have no idea which one you guys are going to see next. But I do have sort of 3 projects right now that one is further ahead than the other 2. But And I'm kind of gauging as I talk to people. And the biggest thing, honestly, a thing that you can do that you shouldn't feel weird about is like, I talk to readers, like my friends who are like real readers, like people who like actually read a ton of things. And I float ideas by them. Like I was like, is this something you would read? Do you want to read this? And I see what they say. And a lot of times it's like, no one wants to read that. Put that away. And, other times it's like, yes, write this now. So that's a good thing too for market research. Just talk to your friends who are good readers.
I'm glad you brought that up. How do you engage an audience during a reading, especially as you're online right now? So is there a technique, how do you keep readers invested? How do you engage the audience? How do you keep them present?
Yeah.
I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah. So I've done a couple of events. We had our launch for this book at RG Julia, which was so much fun. And they're my favorite little bookstore. I love them. And one thing I found myself doing, and maybe this was because I was a little anxious beforehand, so like maybe had a glass of wine before I went up. And I found myself in the middle of the reading doing voices and mannerisms for the characters. And I was like, why am I doing this? But I couldn't stop myself. And people were laughing and engaging with it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Vulnerable.
Which is not something I don't have a talent for that. I don't think I can do. I don't think I should do voices and things, but I definitely found myself like, there's this like very like toxic masculine bro-y neighbor dad man who like, when his lines came up, like I delivered them like this, and I was like, what is wrong with me? But people thought it was fun. And that's also how I imagine he sounds. And so, the other thing too is make your reading selection ahead of time. I learned a lot at Fairfield, going to all of those great readings and all of those. And I think I saw Baron Wormser join here, and Baron is such a great reader. And it's, I've seen a lot of, you want to make sure that it's contained. You want to make sure that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? That like it all goes together. And so, without requiring too much backstory, I've seen readings where people will be like, okay, so here's the story. The boy wizard is at a school, and so far he's made one friend, but not the other friend. And one teacher hates him, but there's a wizard who wants to kill him. I'm like, that is way too much backstory. Like, you got to kind of like, because the idea is that when you do these readings is that people will then read the book. Right? So one of my big things is I always try to make sure that I pick a section that's enclosed. So, those of you who've read Fever and know it, I usually read Carla's section of the garden party, because we see this garden party a couple different times. We see it two different ways, because we have four narrators, so we can follow four people. And so always pick something that has like a beginning, middle, and an end, like a short story within the novel itself.
Exactly, self-contained.
Yeah.
And I would add, when you're doing those impressions, you were vulnerable, and I think that actually seems to work really well. I do a little bit of teaching, and I've been observing other teachers and how they engage with classrooms, and it's kind of lowering the walls and stop trying to pretend to be who you think you're supposed to be. And if you just kind of like fall into it, it seems to work better. But engaging in 2020, right, radically different from 2019. Do you have any marketing suggestions? Like, is Twitter still as valid? Are you finding Twitter still as valid in 2020? I'm seeing book trailer, little snippets using TikTok. Instagram obviously has taken off in a big way. What's your prediction for 2020 in marketing?
I am not the right person to ask. If only we had an astrologer that we were friends with who could predict something for us. But anyway, I think she's watching. But anyway, I think, one of the things is that so I'm too old for TikTok, which I'm super grateful. Like, my neighbor has
never too old. No.
My neighbor has a 14-year-old daughter. We were all sitting around the other night, and I said, well, I don't understand TikTok. And she goes, you don't have to. And I was like, this is all I need is like, thank you, teenager, for telling me I don't have to learn this. So I think TikTok, I don't know where that's going to go or what that's going to be, but I do think Instagram is also really good. Twitter is tough. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I recommend it, but I don't, because it is tough. There are a lot of. I'll just say there's a lot of nasty
shouting in the wind, right?
You're shouting into the wind. You got to build a platform, which is a little bit harder to do, and there's a lot of like bad people. There's a lot of Nazis and faceless people and white nationalists and like when you post something, people come at you and like. very, people subtweet you. Like, I've seen that. People like subtweet me and I'm like, are they talking about me? Are we like, Twitter stuff. If you can stay in the writing community groups and stuff on Twitter, that feels a little safer. But even then, there's always like conflict, and it's always like very like. Yeah. So you know, Twitter, but I still think Instagram also is really good because you can always see what people are reading, which is good. You can always see what people are talking about. You know, you can always and the visual piece I think is nice as well. Yes. Yeah, no, so I definitely Instagram probably. I don't know. I'm really bad at the social media piece. I try and keep up, but I'm like, now I think I'm getting too old. I'm like, is this happening? Like,
you're not. No, I'm older than you. See, never. Just I always tell myself, never too old. I think it's actually shifting out a little, social media, and I think you're going to see book clubs are going to become even bigger.
I hope so.
Book clubs are really growing steam. I know a lot of people. You know, you're at home. It's a pandemic. You still want to be social. I think getting involved in book clubs could be really useful in 2020 and beyond. Yeah. All right, so 2020, massively different year. Have you changed your approach to sales at all, right? Right now we mail copies. We do a lot of catering to people that don't want to go to a bookstore. So we'll go ahead, we'll process your order and mail it ourselves. You know, we make sure all books wiped down. It's all COVID, you know, COVID-19 free. So it's a slightly different process. Have you been changing your sales strategy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so I've definitely been dialing back the amount of promotional posts I've been doing, at least in the past few weeks. Not so much about coronavirus, but more about the revolution that's happening right now in our country. Because I think the last thing we need is like one more white guy being like, buy my book, like in this climate. So I've been like definitely for the past few weeks trying to like dial it back, not do less like, you know, very, you know, do less hawking of it, just to be respectful of what incredible changes happening right now. But I also started, this was before the movement was active in the past few weeks. I started doing for folks who wanted signed copies of the book, sending book plates, signed book plates. So like, you know, if somebody sends me a thing and says, I have a signed copy, I literally sent one out to like my like third cousin today, because my father was like, he needs one, he needs a signed book plate. And I was like, all right, give me his address. And really easy. I just print them on stickers. I had a friend who may or may not be watching design it for me. And I just write a message and sign it. And it's like I held the book in my hands and signed it, and you stick it on the inside and there you go.
Something cool that I've been seeing, I had an author recently contact me and sent me a CD of music she made to accompany the manuscript to listen. So it almost becomes like a cinematic experience. And the same author is working on a poetry collection, and she records the poetry because the sound of her voice is so powerful. So that way, when you read the book, you can also listen to the CD of her reading it while you're reading it, right? So there's some really clever things you can be doing with audio. And I saw a question from Maria that about book clubs, and Woodhull doesn't have a book club yet, but we have it in the works. We do have a podcast launching next week called Publish This. I'll mention it again at the end. And the book club will follow, and a newsletter. So we're ramping up all things for people to be at home and experience, you know.
I love that. I wish you know, who said it? That I think it was Kurt Vonnegut who said every writer wishes they were a musician. You know, like I thankfully do not have that ability.
Well, you know what? It would be interesting if you could even record maybe some sample chapters in your voice, like read them. Even put it on the Woodhull website, right? Like a sample, like listen to the reader read the book a little bit.
Absolutely.
And then if people like it, well, then there's your podcast. You know, you read sample chapters.
I'm amenable to. It's the singing and the music part. That is not something I can do.
It's all right. So looks like kind of we're approaching 12:30. I'm going to kind of bring it to these 3 questions. Now, these are at the end of every podcast episode. Publish This. First episode next week. We ask 3 questions. And first one I ask because I'm interested. Coffee or tea? And I ask it because I do coffee. I have friends. I'm just always interested because in the world of writers, there seems to be a strong divide. They don't really walk the line. It's coffee or tea. So are you coffee or tea? What do you think?
Wine.
Wine.
No, it's,
Take it right off.
My poor body. It's my poor body is like subjected to coffee until like noon, and then I drink nothing until 5 o'clock, and then it's time to uncork. And so, wine is the no, but definitely coffee. Tea, I don't. I like well, coffee and wine kind of go together. There's that the darkness to it, and so that works for me.
All right. Next, a little bit more. One quote, motto, song that kind of gets you up every day, inspires you as a writer. You know, there's something, right? For whatever reason, for years now, this has gone on for at least 6 years. When I start working really hard, I hear that song, Taking Care of Business, in the back of my head. And it's like, it drives me bananas, but I also recognize it's my own internal song that's telling me I'm being productive. So what's your motto, song? What gets you going?
Writing, it's always, I just need loud music on to actually kind of, the loud music distracts the other parts of my brain and lets the art part come forward. But my personal motto and my personal philosophy and belief is actually a line from Star Trek, which will surprise no one.
I thought you were going to say that.
There's always one, but it's not a well-known one. It's that the best way to know yourself is to know others. Ooh, and I love that's like been my core philosophy my whole life, is like the best way to understand myself is to know others. And I couldn't believe how well like that summed it up. And it was like this like very tragic character, very sad, and but that was like her like enduring legacy. And I was like, that is such a thing. Like that's like, if I had to get a tattoo, which I am like never gonna get a tattoo because I'm not like brave enough, but that would be a quote that I would consider because I believe the best way to know yourself is to know others.
That's good. And last, before we depart, is any final tips or advice for the viewers listening, if as a writer, like any final thought?
Yeah. Read everything. Read.
Yeah.
A good writer friend of mine, when I was doing like an AMA, and she was like, I asked the question, I was like, well, what do you do when you don't feel like it? Because everybody who does this knows that this is wonderful work, and it's exciting work, and it's great work, and it's also the worst work in the whole world. And so when I don't feel it, and I'm not vibing it, and it's not working, I find that like I just need to read more. I just need to spend more time reading, spend more time with good fiction. So like, for example, with this new book I'm working on, one of the new books, I before I sit down, I always read a little bit of whatever literary fiction I'm reading at the time, because it's just going to be another literary fiction novel. But and so right now it's Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. And so I read a little bit of that to like get in the vein and feel it and feel what's going on. Now she's like an absolute master, like, oh my God. And so I will never write that well. Sorry in advance, Dave. But so that's definitely something, is read as much as you can. Just read it all.
This has been a pleasure. I've been here with Nick Mancuso of Fever. If you haven't read it, check it out. And stay tuned for the Publish This podcast launching next week. And we'll continue to do these Instagram lunchtime chats, if not every week, at least every other week. So thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for having me. This was great. Bye, everybody.